Hello, and welcome to Zero to Something, a place where we honestly talk about founders' journeys, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. So, without further ado, let's get started. So today I actually wanted to talk about something very interesting, and I wanted to kind of look at my life and see where there are some similarities between the areas of my life. And starting a company is like applying for a visa, but to a country that doesn't exist yet. You make up the rules, you build up the evidence, and you still wonder if someone's going to deport you back to your normal job. So I've been an immigrant for the majority of my adult life. I've lived in Europe and Asia, and every place came with its own hoops to jump through, whether it was proving my economic value to a visa officer or trying to renew residency while the laws changed overnight. I've had to fight for the right to stay over and over again. And weirdly, it's not so different from building a startup. This episode is about the emotional and often absurd overlap between founding a company and moving countries. It's about uncertainty, systems you can't control, and people who doubt you, and the stubborn little voice that says, do it anyways. So I've lived all over the place. I was born and raised in Russia, in Siberia, but I moved out when I was 16 years old. And I went to live in Germany, Italy, Malaysia, and then another city in Russia, and now the UK. My current home, we'll find out for how long. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So now let's look at all the ways that I found that immigrating and building a startup basically feels like the same thing. 1, you have to constantly prove you're worthy. No one takes your word for it. Not in immigration, not in startups. You need DAX and data and letters of recommendation, traction, LinkedIn connections, proof you won't be a burden to the economy. Sound familiar? Investors want FOMO, accelerators want proof of market fit, and your friends are still waiting for you to get a real job. Whether it's a visa or a pre-seed round, you're just pitching for the permission to exist. Number 2, it's slow, it's uncertain, and slow again. Paperwork disappears into the void. Emails don't get answered. You don't know if the visa is coming or the funding is coming or the first user. It's like standing in a line at a government office for 6 months, only to find out that you're missing that form B42. That's what launching a startup sometimes feels like. Another thing is paperwork, admin, bureaucracy. Being a founder is 30% big ideas and 70% have you submitted the compliance form. There is always another thing to fill out. A weird tax rule, a pitch deck version 24B. Honestly, I think most founders would survive immigration just based on their ability to survive Notion folders and broken Google Sheets. And also vice versa. Anybody who's been through immigration knows the pain of bureaucracy and paperwork, and we can handle those billions of papers in startups. Next one is rules change mid-game. No warnings. One morning you wake up and suddenly the entire immigration policy of the country you live in changes. Or that a big company that wasn't actually your competitor before, but they kind of did something adjacent, now are announcing that they're releasing this new amazing product that's exactly what you're building. Or a platform that you really depend on suddenly changes its API. Or your ICP shifts mid-pilot. The startup path is like playing chess, where a queen occasionally turns into a shrimp. Another way to are very similar is not about what they are, rather how you feel. And you get lost and you get overwhelmed. When you arrive in a new country, you suddenly need to buy a SIM card and open a bank account and download a billion new apps that are very specific to the city. And then you're panicking and running around and figuring out what to do. Startups are very similar. You have signed up for 19 different SaaS tools and don't remember what they all are. Everyone seems to have an advice and none of it seems to fit. And now you're pivoting. Well, you're pivot again. Another one is that hope and despair take turns driving. Some days you feel unstoppable. Other days you seriously consider just moving across the world and hiding yourself on a beach. The emotional ups and downs are real, whether you're waiting for your first customer or your visa approval. The switch between this might actually work and what was I thinking? My entire world is on fire can happen within a couple minutes. But somehow you still show up, not because it's easy, but because the alternative is giving up something that truly matters to you. Another similarity is that people either admire you or they think you're unhinged. You're so brave for doing that. I would have never been able to. Have you ever heard it with that little hint of, oh, you're insane? Founders and immigrants both live in that uncanny valley of admiration and complete and utter confusion. Half the room claps and admires and supports, while the other half is waiting for you to crash and burn just so they can say, I told you so. And the last similarity is that eventually things start working. Not in the montage with that amazing background music and not all at once, but eventually something clicks. You understand the system better. You find your people. You stop asking for permission. That's the real milestone, not the visa itself and not the funding, but the moment you realize, I belong here. In the end, it's not about founding that company or crossing the borders. It's all about choosing to believe in your own vision and your own future when nobody else has the answers. Whether you're pitching a VC or waiting for a visa, remember, your persistence is the proof. And as always, I'd like to leave you with 2 follow-up prompts for reflection. This time, because the whole video is a little more personal to me, I'd like you to kind of reflect on the main ideas of it rather than the actual topic. So question 1 is, what systems are you currently waiting on? And what would happen if you stopped waiting? And number 2, where are you still playing by someone else's rules? And please, all my fellow founders and my fellow immigrants and my fellow founder immigrants and immigrant founders, share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear more and see what adversities you have faced, how you have overcome them, what support systems you had. I'd love to have that conversation because being an immigrant and being a founder, it's like having double trouble. Thank you for tuning in today. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next episode.